Well, here it is. The season a lot of us have been waiting for. It's October, and that means it's Halloween season. My favorite holiday during my favorite season, and I get to miss it this year for vacation. I know I sound like I'm being a negative Nancy, because obviously, who doesn't want to be on vacation? But of all the months in the year, it just had to be during my favorite one. I mean, anyone who lives somewhere with a distinct fall season should know what I'm talking about. Beautiful bright leaves, absolutely perfect sweater weather, and some of the best vibes you can ask for. From Halloween-themed house decorations to TV specials, today I decided what better to discuss than some nostalgic childhood bangers. So today, we're going to be talking the best episodes of the children's horror show, Goosebumps.
You will beware. You're in for a scare. Goosebumps.
Now, I'm sure most of you know what Goosebumps is, but if you don't, Goosebumps is a series of childhood horror books written by legendary author R.L. Stine that began publication in the 90s. I know, some of you are sitting there on your iPads like, books? What the heck is books? Well, they were like Netflix shows that you could put in your backpack back in the Stone Age. But yeah, Goosebumps was a massively popular series amongst kids and teenagers in the 90s and early 2000s, and had a show adaptation airing from 1995 to 1998. And honestly, there's nothing quite like it. Well, there kinda is. But Goosebumps just has an extra layer of Halloween nostalgia that you just can't find anywhere else. So here are some of the best episodes of Goosebumps. Now, I just want to say before I get into the video, my original plan was to have all 3 episodes covered in one big video and have it as a Halloween special. But I realized I don't really have much time before my trip, and I'm recording all my September and October videos in September. So I'm just going to break this one up into 3 videos and have each one cover a different episode. Now, with that being said, first up on our list of top tier Goosebumps classics, we have The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This episode follows Grady Tucker and his family as they move from Vermont to Florida. So that Grady's parents, who are deer scientists, yeah, I didn't know that was a job either, but they moved here so they can research how deers are affected by living in a swamp. That swamp being Fever Swamp, the swamp in the woods behind their new house. Now, clearly being a deer scientist doesn't pay too well, given this fucking trap house they moved into, but the episode starts with Grady and his mom looking at his new shitty booty room, with his mom just like, oh, wow, Grady, look at your room, it's rustic. Rustic is pretty cool nowadays. It looks like shit. But yeah, they move into this horror house with peeling wallpaper, cracks in the ceiling, and possible bloodstains on the wall.
Is this a blood stain? No, that's just, dry rot.
And then Grady's sister Emily comes in screaming because she found a corn snake in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. And their dad's just like, well, oh fuck, we moved to Florida, get used to it. As Grady roasts the shit out of his sister. Then their dad hands Grady the snake, and he's like, okay, go get rid of this thing in the swamp. So Grady takes the snake outside to the swamp to get rid of it. Now, for some reason, he walks like 5 minutes into the woods just to drop the snake off, but once he does, you can see Grady start to get a little creeped out, and about 30 seconds later, he realizes he's now lost. I mean, he tells himself multiple times he's not lost, but he looks pretty fucking lost to me. So now he's just full on running from fear and is lucky enough to bump into the swamp molester. Then the episode cuts to the next morning, where we find out that Grady's parents brought the deer from home. Some really have McDonald's at home type beat. But yeah, they have all the deer fenced off on their property, while Grady talks to his dad about the predator he ran into in the woods yesterday. And his dad's just like, he's just a hermit who lives off the land. He's not gonna hurt anyone. And I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm on Grady's side with this one. There's a fucking homeless man living in the woods behind the house. And it's not like this is a park or something. He's just chilling in the swamp. Like, you could post up pretty much anywhere, and you chose a swamp of all places. But yeah, and then his dad just keeps talking about the fucking deers and how they've never been near a swamp before, but soon they're gonna adapt because they always adapt because they have to. And I'm just sitting there like, well, if they don't adapt, do they just die? What if they don't adapt? So then we cut to the evening with Grady trying to fix a shitty 90s TV that isn't working, while his parents both sit around a little shitty 90s laptop and complain about how Grady's being annoying because he's trying to fix the TV. And really, it's just trying to show us how boring Grady finds his new home. But luckily, the next day, he meets another kid while playing catch by himself outside his house, who, by the way, looks 11, but also 29 at the same time, which was kind of distracting. But the kid introduces himself as Will, the next door neighbor. And they start chopping it up, and Will's like, yeah, we're the only kids living here, it's only old farts. And then Grady's asking him if he wants to play catch, but Will's like, nah, baseball is gay, let's shoot some guns. And then Grady's like, my family doesn't believe in guns. And then Will's like, damn, you guys really are gay. Until they finally start talking about some shit that matters when the swamp gets brought up. So Will starts telling Grady swamp stories with his too big head on his too little body, and says sometimes when people go into the swamp, they never come back. And then he's like, do you know why your family got that house so cheap? And then Grady's like, yeah, because it's a fucking monster house. And then Will says it's actually because the lady that used to live in the house went into the swamp one day and never came back. And then he's like, yeah, so fuck it, let's go check out the swamp. So the boys go into the swamp, and so they're walking through the swamp, and then Grady's like, you know, some of the most successful predators live in swamps and jungles. Then he asks Will why the swamp is called Fever Swamp, and Will explains it's because people say the swamp makes you go crazy and basically makes you sick in the head, thus giving it the name Fever Swamp. This kind of scares Grady, so he's like, maybe we should go. And then you hear the sound of what can only be described as a horse having its nuts stepped on, and the camera panning to this fucking fallen over tree. I don't know, but then Will freaks out and he's like, oh no, run. And the boys start running, and then Will trips Grady by his ankle, which for a second I was like, oh, you little shit. But then you realize he's trying to get Grady down so they won't be seen by, drumroll please, The swamp molester. So then Will starts talking about how he's surprised to see okay, just in case this ends up in some type of guideline violation, I'm just gonna call him the hermit like they do in the show, but feel free to use his nickname on your end. But Will is surprised because he says usually the hermit only comes out at night, and Grady's like, oh, I saw him yesterday. And Will's like, oh, well, good thing he didn't see you. Am I right? And then Grady's like, he did see me. And then Will's like, fuck, Grady, that's bad. Now he's gonna come sneak into your room and fondle your nuts while you sleep. And then Grady's like, oh no. But yeah, and then Will says that all the swamp disappearances are actually caused by the hermit, even though no one's been able to prove it. But then Grady says his dad says he's harmless. And then Will's like, nah, bullshit. He's been out here fucking kidnapping and murdering people for the last 60 years. And then Grady's like, well, there's no way he's that old. And then Will's like, nah, people like him don't age like the rest of us, man. He only eats organic eggs and shit, and he doesn't use any artificial preservatives. He's really self-sustainable and avoids processed foods and anything GMO'd. And then Will says the hermit is actually a werewolf who will never die as long as he keeps finding victims, and points out that there's going to be a full moon tonight. So now it cuts to nighttime, and the family's having dinner, and Grady's mom asks him about meeting Will, and Grady decides to tell them about what Will said about the swamp, and all the disappearances, and the werewolf, and obviously his parents think it's stupid. And then Grady says that Will told him the hermit is the werewolf, and that's when his dad finally gets tired of it, which it's pretty funny how defensive he's been of the backyard homeless dude. But yeah, he just shuts down Grady's whole rant and says it's bullshit. And then the episode drops this little haunted mask Easter egg, and then we get to watch Will waking up in a cold sweat, and it just freaks him out because he thinks he has a fever from the swamp now and goes to check his temperature in the bathroom. Luckily, he doesn't have a fever. It's just AIDS. And then Grady goes downstairs and he's looking outside, and I guess he starts feeling creeped out for some reason. So he starts running around to all the doors and windows to make sure everything is closed and locked. But then he notices the back door is unlocked and slightly open. So then he slowly walks up to the back door and gets jumped by a werewolf. Okay, we find out it was actually just a dog. But before this, Grady's mom comes down, and while Grady is yelling in panic for his life, she's just like, Grady?
Grady?
Like basically just fucking whispered it. Grady? Like her son is most likely getting murdered or something heinous, and she's just there whispering. But yeah, so we find out it's presumably one of the neighbor's dogs, I'm guessing, and the door was open because something was bothering the deers, and Grady's dad went to go check on it, and he left the door open. And since the dog has no collar, Grady asked to keep the dog for a while because it might be a stray, and his dad begrudgingly agrees. So now they have a dog. And then we cut to the next morning with Grady playing with his new dog, and Grady decides to name the dog Vandal, which I mean, alright man, whatever, do you, I guess. Then Grady's mom tells them that tonight there's gonna be a lunar eclipse, which freaks out Grady some more because, you know, the moon and the werewolf and whatever. And now we cut to later in the day with Grady hanging out with Will again in the swamp for some reason. So they're talking about like werewolves and whatever, and they see this like weird twig thing tied to a branch, and Will says it's meant to scare off werewolves. And then Grady trips and falls down this fucking, what is this, like a 2% incline? But Grady trips and falls down this slightly slanted grass into the swamp, and now Grady is here at the bottom of this terrible drop. And he's fucking crawling around like he got his leg blown off at the beaches of Normandy. But Will follows him down here, and now they're at the bog, which Will says is the heart of the swamp. And he tells him about a kid that fell into the bog and got sucked down there.
That's what she said.
And then Grady's like, I wonder how deep it is.
That's what she said. Or he said.
And so Will sticks his fingers in there.
That's what he said, right, guys? Because of gay?
And he tries to see how deep the bog is. And then Will starts freaking out, and he says something's got him, and he's yelling for help. So Grady tries helping him, and he pulls up a shoe. And then Will bursts out laughing because he was messing with Grady, and it was just a prank. But to be fair, whose shoe is that? We're just gonna gloss over the fact that you just pulled the shoe out the swamp. All right. But yeah, so Vandal starts freaking out again, and Will says something's watching them. So he grabs some of those little twig things from earlier off a branch for him and Grady, I guess to show he's scared that the werewolf might be there. But then we cut to Grady's sister Emily walking around the yard listening to music on her fucking Walkman, because it's the 90s, and she stumbles across this clearly dead bunny. And she's like, oh wow, cute little bunny. Oh my god, it's fucking dead. It's fucking dead, oh my god. And so now we cut to Grady's parents in like the basement of the house doing these mad deer scientist experiments, with Emily telling them about her newfound trauma after seeing a dead rabbit. And her mom's like, well, didn't you think something was wrong when it didn't move? And she's like, I thought it liked me. Oh boy. So then Emily blames Grady's new dog for killing the bunny. And Grady's like, bro, what the fuck? No, he didn't do this. And then his parents are looking at this mauled deer from last night, and they're also blaming Grady's dog. And his dad says the bite marks in the deer were canine bites, so it just had to be his dog. And then Grady's like, well, it could have been a wolf. And his parents are like, nah, it was your dog, you little shit. And then his dad's like, fuck your dog, we're putting him down. Okay, no, not really, but that's the vibes they give off. So now Grady and Will are back in the swamp while Grady tries to find the werewolf to clear Vandal's very creative name. And then the boys come across the hermit's cabin, and Grady looks inside the window.
It's dark in there.
So now the hermit is chasing the boys through the swamp, and Grady gets caught in a fucking cartoon-ass net trap and screams for help. And then the hermit emerges with this creepy-ass smile on his face, rubbing his dookie fingers across his forehead, and then drags Grady back to his cabin, still caught in this big-ass net. Then he throws him on the floor and proceeds to eat chicken in his face. And now Grady is desperate to escape, so he's begging to be let go, and says that people are going to come looking for him, so he can't keep him there, and that his parents are going to come back with guns. Which, in case you forgot, is a lie, since his family doesn't believe in guns. Which is pretty fucking stupid, since guns are clearly real, but yeah. And then Grady's like, yeah, I bet you never seen an elephant rifle before, and honestly, I don't know how he hasn't noticed the fucking rifle leaning against the table right in front of him, but when he says that, the hermit picks the gun up, and honestly, even though you know it wouldn't happen, it would be pretty funny if the hermit just fucking shot Grady because he wouldn't shut up, and that's how the episode ends. But yeah, he picks up the gun and then he puts it on the wall and starts getting freaky with Grady. Just looking at him all funny and touching the net and shit, and then he fucking goes outside and starts howling at the moon. But now Grady gets out of the net because, well, it was open the whole fucking time. And he sneaks out back and escapes. When he gets home, he tells his mom they need to get out of the house because of the swamp hermit. And his mom is just like, did he hurt you? And Grady's like, no. And then she's like, did he threaten you? And he's like, no. He's a werewolf. Which honestly, if you're trying to convince your parents about a dangerous werewolf in the woods, maybe you should start with, he trapped me in a net and dragged me into his cabin. But I guess you could keep trying to sell the werewolf story instead. Then suddenly they hear loud noises and Vandal barking outside, and then this fucking, I'm guessing it's supposed to be a deer, but whatever the fuck this is comes crashing through the window, which is honestly too funny to not replay like 8 times. But Grady and his mom go outside to find Vandal barking at deer fence, which has been ripped open, and one of the deers being dead. And I guess the rest of them had escaped. So then Grady's mom freaks out, and she's blaming the dog again, and says to call the sheriff to get rid of the dog, which, I mean, if you didn't think they wanted to kill it before, they seem pretty angry at it now. So Grady keeps defending his dog, saying he's gonna protect him from the werewolf, and his mom is not having it. So she goes to lock the dog in the shed or whatever, but then Grady calls him out, and he comes running out, and then he locks his mom inside. But then when Grady turns around, Vandal is now gone, and he hears some type of weird person yelping noise, and decides to go into Will's fucking house in the middle of the night for some reason, and calls out for Will or one of his family members to see if they're there. Then we cut back to his mom, now locked in the shed, and by the way, at this point, his dad is out, and so is his sister with the car. And then for some reason, it shows Emily pulling up to the house and fucking running out of the car, so then it makes you think she's running to her screaming mom in the shed, but she's really just running into the house for no reason. I don't know. But then it just goes back and forth with Emily yelling in the house because no one's home, and Grady's still in fucking Will's house where he's still yelling for Will, and he finds these like deer heads lined up on the wall in the room, which seems like foreshadowing, but who knows. And after some more back and forth cuts, Grady decides he's gonna go out to the swamp. And by the way, I just want to say this whole fucking episode is dark as fuck. And I mean literally dark as fuck. Like, you actually can't see shit in a lot of these scenes. I don't know if it's just my TV or something, but I assume it's also because of the budget and the fact this was a 90s show. But yeah, it's pretty dark. But then after some more of Grady yelling for Will and Emily yelling for Grady or their parents, we get flashed with Shaq's toes. But the camera pans out to reveal it's not actually Shaq, but a werewolf. And dare I say, this werewolf just might be the werewolf of Fever Swamp. And so now the werewolf is chasing Emily. And I gotta say, Goosebumps used to love using this funny camera blur shake effect for chase scenes, which honestly just kind of looked like we were watching from the perspective of someone who just got roofied. But I mean, it was the 90s, so I'll give it a pass. It's still funny though. So yeah, the werewolf chases Emily outside, and she runs to the shed where her mom is still locked inside. Opens it and then locks it behind her because she doesn't want to be viciously ripped apart by the werewolf. Pretty reasonable. But then the werewolf just starts going fucking ape shit and jumping on top of the shed, which I found pretty funny, not gonna lie. And then Emily is screaming, and the mom tells her to shush, as if the werewolf just fucking forgot they were in there, like he didn't just literally chase her in there 20 seconds ago. But yeah, and then we come back to Grady still yelling for Will in the forest. And then he runs into the werewolf. And while Grady's running from the werewolf seems to get caught in a net trap. And then Grady runs into none other than, well, you know him by now. I don't gotta say his name. The Swamp Man, who also clearly is not the werewolf. So now we find out the hermit is not only not the werewolf, but he can also speak. Even though before he was just grunting and moving around like a fucking wild animal. But yeah, so he starts talking shit to the werewolf who's now caught in his net trap. Like, you killed my family, I've been waiting to catch your bitch ass. And then he realizes it's a deer in the net. And then the actual werewolf pops up and jumps him. And then the werewolf goes after Grady, and for some reason he hits him with this fucking Jaden Smith Karate Kid ass fucking two-handed punch thing. Instead of maybe, I don't know, using his fucking claws or his teeth, he just decides it's better to hit him for some reason. But just in time, the full moon gets blocked out and the werewolf falls down and starts transforming back into a human. And this is where the twist comes in, because the werewolf is actually, you may have guessed it by now, Will. So Grady's like, damn, Will, you're the werewolf? You were my fucking boy, dog. And then Will's like, he doesn't want to hurt him, but he can't stop himself. And when the full moon comes back, he transforms back into a full werewolf form and attacks Grady again. And guess who shows up just in time to save the day? Vandal, the stupid name dog. And so Vandal attacks the shit out of Will, who, I'm gonna be honest, 100% deserve this L because you're a fucking werewolf, bro. If you lose to a regular ass dog, you weren't meant for this werewolf life. But yeah, Vandal jumps his ass and knocks him into the swamp where he sinks and I guess he dies. So now we cut to the next day and the whole family's at breakfast, and now of course 3 of the 4 family members have encountered the werewolf, and the dad is still trying to say this werewolf stuff is nonsense. But you know what? Fuck him. He wasn't there. But he does apologize about being a dick about the dog though. So there's that. And then in typical Goosebumps fashion, we get a twist ending where Grady wakes up from a nightmare about the werewolf and then goes outside to a full moon and howls. Of course implying that whenever Grady got attacked by Will, he got infected with werewolf juice? Okay, no, that doesn't sound right. Well, basically, Grady's a werewolf now. Now, it's no secret this is one of the most popular Goosebumps books and episodes, and honestly, outside of some parts being too dark lighting-wise, I completely understand why. This was actually the first ever Goosebumps book I read as a kid, because a kid on my school bus said, let me read it. So this is actually the story that introduced me to the Goosebumps series, and overall, this episode was pretty fun to watch. So if you haven't seen this by now, go check it out. And now, the next Goosebumps banger we got is